My name is Caleb Thomas. I'm 13 years old. And on March 12, 2024, I died for 9 minutes after a sudden accident. It was an ordinary afternoon in my quiet hometown. A place where kids rode their bikes down tree-lined streets, where neighbors waved from porches, where life felt safe. But in a single heartbeat, that sense of safety was ripped away. One moment, I was just another boy racing toward home. The next, I was lying lifeless, surrounded by flashing lights and frantic voices. Doctors later called it a freak occurrence, something no one could have predicted, something no one could explain. But what happened to me in those 9 minutes was not natural. I crossed a line few ever returned from. And while my body lay still, I was shown visions that no child should ever carry. What I saw was not about celebrities or inventions. It wasn't about fame or technology. It was about the future of nations, the persecution of believers, and signs written in the heavens themselves. I came back with a message that terrifies me to this day, a message meant not just for me, but for anyone willing to listen. Stay until the end, because what I was shown could shape the choices you make in the years ahead. Before that day, my life was as simple as any 13-year-old's. I lived with my mom, my dad, and my little sister, Hannah, in a small house just outside town. My mother worked at the local clinic, always bringing home stories that made me laugh or cringe. My father, a quiet man with rough hands, spent weekends teaching me how to fix things, broken shelves, squeaky doors, even an old lawnmower that refused to die. I wasn't special. I went to school, tried to keep up with math, and counted down the minutes until recess. I played soccer with my friends on a dusty field behind the school. I dreamed of making the real team next year, of wearing a jersey with my name on it. On summer evenings, I helped Dad water the garden while Hannah ran barefoot through the grass, squealing when the hose caught her by surprise. Life was ordinary. Life was good. But scattered through the laughter and routines were warnings I didn't understand. My grandmother, a gentle woman with silver hair, often quoted scripture at the dinner table. "Caleb," she would say, "remember what Jesus told his disciples, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not yet." I would nod, half listening, more concerned about finishing dessert before Hannah stole my slice. Even at church, the pastor's words sometimes carried a weight I didn't want to think about. "A generation will witness great shaking," he said one Sunday, his eyes searching the room. "They will see prophecies unfold before their very eyes." I fidgeted in my seat, waiting for the service to end, never imagining those words would soon take root in my own story. I thought I had endless days ahead. But on March 12, everything changed. It happened so quickly, no one could have stopped it. School had just let out, and I hopped on my bike for the short ride home. The air was cool, the sky a pale spring blue, and I remember thinking about the soccer tryouts coming up in a few weeks. My legs pumped harder as I raced down the hill near the main road. Then, the sound of tires screeching. A horn blaring. A blur of steel and glass. The impact threw me from my bike, and everything spun into chaos. Witnesses screamed. My backpack flew open, books scattering across the street. My body lay still on the pavement as strangers rushed toward me. Within minutes, paramedics were kneeling at my side. "No pulse," one muttered grimly, and the fight for my life began. Chest compressions pounded against my ribs. Oxygen was forced into my lungs. My mother arrived, her cry piercing through the noise as she collapsed beside me. Sirens wailed as the ambulance sped toward the hospital, every second dragging like eternity. Inside the emergency room, doctors worked frantically. Needles pierced my skin, machines beeped erratically, and then, the flatline. The long, unbroken tone that declared what no parent ever wants to hear. Caleb Thomas was gone. But that wasn't the end. As the monitors screamed and the doctors shook their heads, I found myself no longer inside my body. I hovered above the chaos, watching as if through a veil. I saw my mother's tears, my father pacing in the hallway, fists clenched in helpless rage. I felt no pain, only a strange, unnatural calm. It was as if unseen hands had lifted me free. And that's when my journey into death truly began. The beeping machines, the frantic shouts of the doctors, even the sound of my mother's cries, all of it began to fade. It was as if someone had pulled a curtain between me and the hospital room. I felt myself drifting upward, weightless, like I was being carried on invisible currents. The pain, the fear, the confusion, it all melted away. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the cold, sterile emergency ward. I was standing in a place so radiant, so overwhelming, I can barely find words to describe it. The ground beneath me was like a field of grass, but it wasn't ordinary grass. Each blade shimmered as though lit from within, glowing softly with a golden hue. It swayed without wind, alive in a way that made me want to fall to my knees. Above me stretched a sky unlike any I had ever seen. It wasn't blue, or gray, or filled with clouds. It was pure light. Light that didn't blind me but wrapped itself around me like a blanket of love. It wasn't silent either, there was a hum, a resonance, like a song woven into the very air. Every breath filled me with peace. Every heartbeat pulsed with joy. And then, I saw him. Jesus. Not like the pictures in church bulletins or the stained glass windows. Not soft, not distant. He was real. Strong. Radiant. His presence was both overwhelming and intimate, like standing before the King of the universe and yet being held by a father. His eyes pierced into the deepest part of me, yet they were filled with kindness so pure it made me weep. He walked toward me, and with every step, the light around him seemed to pulse brighter. When he smiled, it was like every good memory I had ever known, every hug from my mom, every laugh with my dad, every warm night under the stars, was concentrated into that single moment. Before I could speak, he reached out and embraced me. The warmth that flooded my body was unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just physical warmth. It was love. A love that told me I was fully known, fully seen, and fully wanted. My heart broke open, and I sobbed into his chest, though no tears stained his robe. "Caleb," he said, his voice deeper than thunder and yet gentler than a whisper. It carried the power of creation itself, but also the comfort of a parent soothing a child. "Your time isn't finished." I wanted to argue. I wanted to stay there forever in that perfection, never return to the brokenness I had left behind. But he lifted my chin, and his eyes met mine. "There is something you must see," he said. "A message for your generation. A warning for the days to come. What I will show you is not to bring fear, but to prepare. You must see what is coming." And as he spoke, the golden field around us began to shift, the light intensifying, preparing to reveal the visions that would haunt me long after I returned. The light around us shimmered, and suddenly the golden field was gone. I was no longer standing in peace but gazing down upon a world I barely recognized. It was Earth, our Earth, but it trembled under the weight of chaos. The first thing I saw was war. Explosions erupted across cities I knew by name: New York, London, Jerusalem, Beijing. Streets were ablaze, smoke twisting into the sky like black towers. Crowds surged in panic, scattering as fire consumed neighborhoods. Tanks rolled down broken highways. Soldiers shouted orders in languages I didn't understand. The sound of gunfire echoed across nations, and yet I could hear every cry, every scream, as if I stood in the middle of it all. "Why are you showing me this?" I whispered, though my voice trembled. Jesus stood beside me, calm yet grieved. "These are the birth pangs," he said. "Nations will rise against nations. Kingdoms against kingdoms. The world will cry for peace, but the hearts of men will not know peace." The scene shifted, and I watched as banks collapsed, currencies crumbled, and people flooded into the streets, desperate and angry. Storefronts were shattered by looters. Men and women fought over scraps of food. The wealthy and powerful hid behind guarded gates, while the poor starved in silence. I saw children digging through garbage for bread. I felt the weight of their hunger like a stone pressing into my chest. And then nature itself turned against mankind. Earthquakes split the ground wide open, swallowing cars, buildings, even whole city blocks. Storms raged with winds so fierce they ripped roofs from homes like paper. I saw waves rising higher than skyscrapers, crashing down on coastlines, devouring everything in their path. Fires swept across forests, consuming miles in minutes, leaving nothing but ash. Floods poured through streets, carrying away cars and families alike. Why is this happening? I asked, tears burning my eyes. Jesus' gaze remained steady. The earth groans under the weight of sin. These disasters are not random, they are signs written long ago, warnings that the end draws near. Suddenly the destruction paused, and a new image rose before me. Leaders stood on platforms draped with flags, microphones amplifying their promises. I saw presidents, kings, and prime ministers addressing massive crowds. Their words flowed like honey, speaking of unity, peace, and a new world where divisions would end. The people cheered, lifting their voices in desperate hope. But then I noticed the shadows. Dark figures hovered just beyond the leaders, whispering into their ears. Their smiles masked chains hidden behind their backs. And though the crowds applauded, their eyes looked empty, as if lulled into sleep. "This is false peace," Jesus said. "Deception wrapped in promises. The rulers of this age are blinded, their strings pulled by forces of darkness. What looks like salvation will become captivity." The scene shifted again. I saw believers, ordinary men, women, even children, huddled together in secret rooms. They prayed in whispers, their hands clutching worn Bibles lit by flickering candles. Outside, the world branded them as dangerous, outdated, obstacles to progress. I watched as officials stormed homes, dragging some into custody. In cities, signs were posted, "No access without proof." Shops refused to sell food to those who resisted. Banks locked out accounts. Believers were denied medicine, shelter, and work. Yet in their poverty and rejection, something extraordinary happened. Their faces began to glow. A light, soft but undeniable, radiated from them. When they prayed, the very air seemed to tremble. When they sang, their voices cut through the darkness like fire. I saw miracles, the sick healed, the hungry fed, the broken restored. Their persecutors mocked them, but even in chains, they shone brighter than the world around them. "These," Jesus said, his voice filled with power, "are my people. Cast out, but not abandoned. Pressed down, but not destroyed. The world will call them weak, but in me, they are strong. The more they are crushed, the more they will shine." My heart ached, torn between sorrow for their suffering and awe at their faith. Then the heavens themselves turned against the earth. I saw the moon rise red as blood. Stars streaked across the sky, falling like fire, leaving trails of smoke and ash. The sun grew dark, its light swallowed by shadows. Day became night, and night became terror. People ran into caves and shelters, crying out for mountains to cover them. "The signs in the heavens," Jesus explained, "are not accidents. They are warnings to all who still refuse to see." I told my disciples these things would come to pass. And now, you see them with your own eyes. I trembled, unable to speak. "Will anyone survive this?" I finally asked. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, and his eyes softened. "Yes. Those who endure, those who remain faithful, those who cling to me no matter the cost, they will be saved." These visions are terrifying, but they are purposeful. They are not to bring despair, but to prepare. The images swirled again: wars, disasters, false leaders, glowing believers, and cosmic signs, until they blended into one overwhelming picture, a world unraveling. "This is not the end," he said gently. "But it is the beginning of the end. You must warn them. Not so they live in fear, but so they live ready." I could hardly breathe. My young heart, unprepared for such weight, struggled to understand. But his voice anchored me. "Caleb," he said, "tell them what you saw. Tell them my words are true. Every prophecy will come to pass. The earth will shake, kingdoms will fall, but my kingdom will never be moved. Those who belong to me will never be forsaken." And as he spoke, the light around us steadied, holding me in peace even as the visions burned into my memory, visions I knew I could never forget, no matter how much I wished I could. As the visions faded, I stood trembling, overwhelmed by everything I had seen. Nations collapsing, believers glowing in secret places, the heavens themselves trembling. My mind felt too small to carry it all. Jesus looked at me with eyes that burned like fire yet overflowed with love. He placed both hands on my shoulders, and I felt strength flow into me. "Caleb," he said, "you must go back. Your time here is not finished. I shook my head. I don't want to leave. Not after this. But he held me closer. Your generation will face choices no other generation has faced. They will be offered promises of safety, prosperity, and progress. But hidden beneath those promises will be chains. They must know the truth. They must be warned before it is too late. I swallowed hard. Why me? I'm just a kid. No one will listen. Jesus smiled gently. I have always used the ones the world calls weak to carry my strongest messages. The prophets were outcasts. The disciples were fishermen. Even a child can become a messenger if I send him. What matters is not your age, but your obedience. He lifted his hand and pointed downward, toward the earth. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them that the end is drawing near. And tell them I will never abandon those who remain faithful to me. Then his voice thundered with authority, if you are hearing this, it is because you are part of the generation that must decide. The light intensified. My chest grew heavy. I felt myself being pulled away, back toward the world I had left behind. Suddenly, I was falling, rushing through a tunnel of light, my heart pounding though my body was still lifeless. And then, with a violent gasp, my lungs filled with air. My eyes snapped open. I was back. The hospital room swirled into focus of bright lights, masked faces, the frantic beeping of machines. Doctors shouted in shock. He's breathing. He's back. One of them whispered, almost to himself, this is impossible. 9 minutes, there should be brain damage. This doesn't make sense. But I wasn't thinking about science or medicine. All I could see was my mother's face, streaked with tears, as she collapsed against the bed, clutching my hand as though she would never let go again. My father stood frozen at the foot of the bed, his strong frame shaking for the first time in my life. I tried to speak, my throat raw and weak. At first only a whisper came out, but it was enough. I saw him. The room fell silent. Nurses glanced at each other, uncertain. But my mother wept harder, as though she already knew exactly what I meant. I had been gone. I had seen Jesus. And I had come back with a message the world wasn't ready to hear. In the days that followed, my body healed, but my heart felt heavier than it ever had before. I knew what I had seen wasn't for me alone. It was meant to be spoken, no matter the cost. I told my parents first. My mother listened with wide eyes, tears streaming as I described the glowing field, the embrace of Jesus, and the visions of a world unraveling. My father sat silently, his jaw tight, struggling to take it all in. When I finished, the room was quiet until my grandmother whispered, "The Lord has chosen you, Caleb. Do not be afraid." Soon after, I shared my story beyond the walls of my home. At first, it was with friends, then with my church. Finally, I turned on the camera of my old phone and recorded it for anyone willing to listen. I uploaded it online, not knowing if anyone would care. The responses came quickly. Some mocked me, calling me delusional, saying I was just a boy making up stories. But then came the private messages, people admitting they had seen the same kinds of dreams. A man in another state told me he'd dreamed of a blood-red moon. A young girl confessed she had seen crowds denied food for refusing to conform. Their words confirmed what I already knew deep inside, this was not a dream. It was a divine assignment. And as headlines flashed across the news, wars breaking out, surveillance expanding, storms destroying coastlines, I felt my conviction deepen. What Jesus had shown me was already beginning. Now I stand before you with the same urgency I felt in that golden field. The visions I carried back were not meant to terrify, they were meant to prepare. The signs are already here. Nations are shaking. The earth itself trembles. Promises of peace are being whispered, but behind them lies deception. And the faithful are being pressed harder each day to bow to systems that will never satisfy. But here is the truth, Jesus is still in control. The chaos does not surprise him. The darkness cannot overcome him. And every trial is a reminder that the time to choose is now. This is not a story to entertain you. It is a warning meant to awaken you. Pray. Repent. Stay vigilant. Do not trade your soul for comfort or compromise. And do not believe the lie that you can wait until tomorrow, because tomorrow is not promised. When I died, I stood before the one who holds eternity. And he made it clear, every person will one day stand in that same place. Don't click away, ask yourself now, if the world ended tonight, where would you stand? The choice is yours.